Hi, ultimate gardeners.
Hi, my name is Nathan.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm Rachel.
Hi, ultimate gardeners.
Whoa, we don't need to see that twice. All right. For our first channel of the week of our summer season, we have with us Paul from Guten Gardening. And Paul and his family have been gardening in Wisconsin for the past 7 years. What started as a 3-foot by 3-foot raised bed has transformed now to the entire exterior of their small property and a good bit of their indoor space as well. They have been sharing their journey. They've been sharing their journey on YouTube for nearly 3 years. Their goal of food self-sufficiency started with one small step of reducing the produce they were buying at the store and has now expanded to growing nearly all of their needed fruits and vegetables and raising enough quail to provide all the eggs and some of the protein they need as well. They hope to encourage as many others to give more attention to gardening, whether that means attempting gardening for the first time, expanding their current garden spaces, or growing as much of their food as possible. All right, everyone, let's welcome to the show Paul from Guten Gardening. How are you doing, Paul? It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I am fantastic. A beautiful day here.
Awesome. Excellent. Again, thanks for joining with us on the show. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your YouTube channel, Guten Gardening.
Well, thank you very much. We started this actually right at the beginning of COVID a couple years ago. I was able to take a little bit of extra time to do something we've wanted to do for a long time, which is to show some of what we're doing in our, we'll call it a gardening journey, what we're developing, and share some of what we have been trying to learn as a part of the process of becoming better gardeners and more effective gardeners. And so that's where our channel itself came from. But the process of gardening for us hasn't actually been a long one, because even though I grew up on a farm up until I was about 5 years old, and I remember some pieces of gardening from that time. I remember specifically, I think I was probably 7 years old. I went back down to the farm to visit my grandparents, and I remember they sent me outside to sit on a 5-gallon bucket and pick green beans, which at the time, the thing I remember the most from that is my back hurting, the sun being really, really hard on my head, which may be why I wear a hat. But I remember those pieces, but it really wasn't an integral part of our lives here up until about 7 years ago. And I truly believe that gardening is one of those very healthy addictions out there, because we started, as I said, at that 3x3 bed. And I think, if I remember correctly, we tried to grow a summer squash, a watermelon, and then we had a bunch of other stuff packed in there that didn't do much of anything because it was packed too tightly. But that experience, brings back a lot of memories from some of those pieces from childhood. But it's that experience of watching things grow, of developing, that pushed us to say, well, what else can we do on our property? And from that point forward, we bought another 3x3 raised bed, which is the last time we bought a raised bed that I can remember. And we made it so that we could extend it to become a 3x9 bed by getting rid of the sides. We expanded that year, and then we just started getting rid of lawn. And believe it or not, that's a lot of work to get rid of lawn, but we got rid of a lot of lawn, and we're at a point now where between raised beds, between the root stout gardening that we do and vertical gardening, etc., we don't have very much of a lawn to mow, to take care of it all. It's just food. So that's where we came from. It's not been a long time, but we certainly have been learning a lot along the way.
Awesome. Yeah, excellent. That's, really great. And like you said, coming out of like the pandemic and being kind of at home a lot and all of that is really, I think, kind of helped flourish the whole like gardening community and show people a lot about how important doing some of that stuff is as well too, which is a lot of what you cover on your channel. So real quick though, when was your actual first gardening experience?
So, I mean, as somebody who grew up on a farm, I don't know if we could call it gardening so much as farming. Not that they're different, but they kind of are. I do remember going out, even as a 3 or 4 year old. It's some of my early memories. I would say, going out and picking corn, and and being there with my grandfather as we went up, taking care of bales of hay and corn and everything else. But getting out there and just pulling it off. It's also my first introduction to earwigs.
Oh God.
But it was a bad experience because actually, that was the first time I ever had corn raw, but getting in there and experiencing that. And then, my grandfather also grew a pretty good number of tomatoes, and tomatoes are one of those crops where you kind of get spoiled eating the ones that you get at the store and the taste of those versus when you have them fresh. And so I remember that from a very young age, just experiencing corn and tomatoes. Those are the two things that stand out to me as my earliest memories.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah. Oh, those darn earwigs too, man. I'm telling you, they have been the bane of my existence in my garden space for sure. I mean, they just I'm still, I've tried almost every tactic there is. I'm trying to deal with them and get rid of them, but they just seem to, like, I don't know. No matter what you kind of throw at them, they seem to kind of even resist that and then show up even stronger the next year. So,
Yeah, yeah,
oh man, but
they're creepy looking too. It doesn't help that the way they look.
I remember, yeah, yeah, I remember, a lot of bugs I've been kind of okay with throughout my life, especially when I was younger and I was a kid. And, a lot of them that would really kind of, like, especially like spiders. I've always really kind of been fascinated with spiders and that sort of thing, which would really creep out most people. But I remember seeing my first earwig when I was younger, and it was the creepiest thing, and it still is today. But and I
So
hate seeing them anytime I do in the garden, and especially it's one thing to see one of them, but when you run into like a nest of them where they're all different sizes and they're running all over the place, they're scurrying as they do pretty much.
I don't want to go too far down this necessarily, but I do remember my grandmother, and she had a chicken coop that she modified to be just a storage space because they got rid of their chickens. And the door to it was a big sliding wooden door. And I remember very distinctly, I was probably 8 or 9, opening that door, and the nest of them just fell right in front of me because they were right up on top of the door, hadn't been opened at all. It's a moment you don't. That's a scarring moment.
Oh, that certainly would be. Oh my, I can't even imagine. I just can't even imagine. I mean, like I said, I'm really cool with most bugs and most things that you find in the garden. It's those earwigs that just completely creep me out. Oh, yeah. Again, and again, like you said, it's their look. You look at that little hook at the end of them,
Mm,
and just imagine them
absolutely.
grabbing a hold of you or something. But no thanks.
We're so
All
much
right.
bigger, and yet.
Awesome, awesome. So what is it in the garden? What do you enjoy most in your garden space? What, about the whole process of gardening?
Yeah, I mean, I think life is pretty stressful no matter what. We all have to deal
Mm,
with stress in our own way. We all are busy. I don't think I can discount anybody and say that somebody's busier than I don't know how you quantify that, but
yeah.
to me, it's kind of like I would say fishing or camping or something like that. Time just seems to slow down a little bit when you're out in the garden. Maybe it's because everything else is there aren't the distractions. There's just the nature, the birds, the experience of being out there. And to me, that experience is what makes one of the things that makes it so particularly special. And today even I got out around 6:30 this morning, get a little bit of work done. And I'm an early morning person no matter what, but there's nothing going on out there except what I need to get done. And I'm moving my hands in the earth. And yeah, it's just the overall experience is relaxing, enjoyable. And I know the end product, there may be some frustration along the way, but the end product is going to be something I'm going to really, and my family is really going to enjoy.
Yes, absolutely. And something I talk about all the time is, that's the one thing I think I really found out of the whole gardening experience myself was that, that kind of time where you just got, you got kind of a peaceful time to yourself to kind of analyze and reflect on everything else that's going on. You get the chance to kind of process things in a way by taking care of these different spaces and plants and different things like that. I mean, I'm one of those people who, I have a few kind of automatic watering systems set up around my gardening, but I really enjoy just hand watering things and being able to take that time, just kind of walking around the garden and being able to, again, reflect on things and think about things and all of that. And that just really kind of helps kind of bring a little bit of serenity to your life a little bit.
Yes.
And I think that's probably, above all of the food and all that sort of stuff that we get to grow, which is great, which I think is probably the second best thing out of the garden. But that's, that peace of mind that we get after taking the time in our garden space is always, always such a valuable thing that we get from our gardening experience.
Yeah, they call it garden therapy for a reason. I mean, it truly is cathartic. I remember a T-shirt that said the best day fishing is better, or the worst day fishing is better than the best day at work. Well, the worst day of gardening is better than just about anything else I can think of, and it's a family affair. I mean, I have I have two children and my wife, and we get out there together. So it's a shared experience. It's something that I know is generational. So if we can pass on a love to our children, then that's a practice that's going to benefit their families and their families. And so, a big picture, it's just a phenomenal craft and experience.
Yeah, awesome. That's nothing more better to do as well too than to share the experience with others. And when you got a family and young kids to be able to do that, that's really awesome. Be able to bring them up with that experience, I think is a really great thing for young kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's see, what are some of your favorite things to grow in your garden?
Well, that's a
It's a tough
it's
question,
actually
isn't
not
it?
it's a hard question, but it's kind of, in a way, it's not. I guess for us, I think we have 490 videos now, and if you search potato on ours, you probably find sweet potato and potato take up about 25 to 28% of those videos, because I absolutely love the experience of growing both of those.
Yeah.
We, I mean, there's so many other vegetables I could mention, but those stand out not just because of the, especially for sweet potatoes, the nutritional benefit, but the experience of a harvest of
Yeah.
something that you can't. I mean, you can check on by pulling some early potatoes, but you don't see what's happening. And then we call it treasure hunting around here, but the experience of going through that harvest and finding what's below the surface and seeing what that 90, 100, 110 days has looked like, what that's transformed into. I think that experience is something like no other. And so I would say potatoes, tomatoes, those are our favorites. I'm sorry, potatoes and sweet potatoes. Tomatoes, though, are one of my personal favorites. Just I call it garden candy. It's the cherry tomatoes in general. I don't know. When I'm walking the garden, we've got lots of berry bushes, etc. But when I'm walking the garden and I want a snack, I can pop over, grab some tomatoes, and just keep going. So, yeah, it's a hard question. It's an easy question. I don't know how to say it, but we've grown so many varieties of different things that I'm going to stick with my potato, sweet potato answer. And even though we're in a cold weather zone, I mean, moderately cold zone with zone 5 here in Wisconsin, and sweet potatoes are a little harder to grow here. I think partly, there's a shorter growing season. It's still something we like to do. We just got 500 sweet potato slips in, plus the ones that we started here. So we're planning to grow a ton of them this year.
Oh yeah, the 500. Are they all different varieties?
Yeah, we got 8 different varieties that we order. We got them from Tater Man, and we've done that the last couple of years. They've done a pretty nice job. It was a George's Plant Farm, and a couple new varieties to us, a couple tried and true varieties that we've done well with, the Beauregard, Georgia Jet, and Centennial. Some of the ones that we really love the taste of that have produced nice size sweet potatoes for us. And so, but yeah, we should have, I think this year, all told, we'll end up with somewhere like 10 different varieties of sweet potatoes that we're going to be planting and
Wow.
growing.
That's
So,
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and I really share with you that idea that growing potatoes is fun because of the mystery that kind of
yeah,
goes along with it. Although, I mean, if people who have followed my channel are seeing, I grow most all of my potatoes. In fact, this year, because of a friend, we have some in-ground space, so that'll be the first time I'm really growing potatoes in ground. Most of the time, because we do small space gardening on the channel, we do them in these large, storage containers.
sure.
And some years are really successful and some years not so much. And
Yeah,
again, too, it all comes down to that experience of the harvest. And I'm telling you, it always seems and it kind of worries me now too. Whenever I'm out there and I look at the container potatoes and I've got these big, giant, thriving plants that just look awesome. Early on, I'd be like, oh, this is going to be great. These are going to be awesome, and then I would dig in and find these little tiny things and not so much of anything. And then I'd have these plants that were just kind of moderate and not so bad, and then I would pull out these big giant things out of
yeah.
them on those seasons and stuff too. So every time I see my plants are huge and thriving, I get to worrying. And
There's
again
so
too,
many
it's like,
factors. Yeah, there's so many
yeah,
factors. The shade, I mean, everything changes each year too. So I know exactly what you mean.
yeah, and usually probably just a little bit too much nitrogen is probably the
Yep.
issue when it comes to big giant flourishing leaves and plants and all of that sort of thing. But it's exactly like you said, it's a treasure hunt, and you don't get to know what the treasure is until you start pulling them up out of the ground. So again, it's one of the again, it's one of those things that's kind of fun in the garden because you get that experience of growing them and taking care of them, tending the space and everything like that. But ultimately, you wait until that day you get to pull them out of the ground and find out everything that you have, and it's really
Absolutely.
great.
And they're so versatile, not just when you eat them, the different ways you can grow them. There's so many opportunities and options, I should say. Like you, we do a ton of container gardening because we don't have a huge space. And so
Hmm.
container, we've done some vertical in hay vertical. We've done the roost out, which has been fantastic. And I know a couple of people in the comments were talking about the problem with snails and other critters out there, but and we've had to deal with some of that as well. Try not necessarily snails, but some of the other animals coming in and trying to snack on our food too. So that's the other challenge I think with these root crops like sweet potatoes is everything looks great and then you pull one up and for us it's voles, but they've come in
Oh,
and they've eaten half of it and you see what would have been huge turns into a little thin piece of nothing that you can't even use. So
man, I feel for you and everyone else who has to deal with those types of pest issues. Mine are mostly bugs and different things like that. I don't really have too much of a worry when it comes to animals and that sort of thing getting into it. But I hear so much of people who have to deal with that, from voles to deer,
ooh,
being, these things that just come in and ravage what you're, all those efforts you put into everything. And I just couldn't imagine pulling things up and finding again too, waiting all that time to, find that harvest and find that when you pull them out would be just really devastating. But and
no,
luckily for you, you're growing so much, which is
right.
always my key to growing things when you're dealing with pests and everything is grow more than you need. That way, in case you do deal with some sort of pest devastation or something like that, you'll have plenty for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. We had 3 years ago we had 120 corn stalks coming in, and the corn was looking nice. And at harvest time, I'm sure a day, 2 days before harvest, we had a raccoon or two come in. And I don't think I've ever been angry in the garden until that day, because they would take each one off. It looked like a person came in, take each one off, peel it down, take a
Oh
bite, and
my.
throw it. And so our entire line of corn was wiped out. The pests can be something else. Absolutely
Oh,
something else.
yes, yes. More so than weeds, they're just truly the bane of any gardener's
Yeah,
existence for sure.
absolutely.
All right. So do you have any least favorite things to grow in the garden? Things that just either don't like, don't eat, or, are just cause too much of a hassle for you when you're growing?
That's such a hard question, because
It
one of the
is.
things we preach on the channel is to grow what you know you'll eat. And
Mm-hmm.
so most everything that we grow, we know we're going to like. So what I guess the way I'll handle that question is to say this. There have been a few things we've planted that we now can't get rid of because they so vigorously self-seed.
Oh
If you
yeah.
go around my property right now, you're going to find strawberry spinach everywhere in containers. It's like, I don't know how. It's been 4 years, I want to say, since we planted, maybe three plus years since we planted it. I don't know how to get rid of it. I've tried
Wow.
everything. And I pull it up before the berries come into the and if I don't know how many people know what strawberry spinach is, but it doesn't taste like strawberries. It's not bad. But the red berries, which is the reason why I think you would grow it, so
Yeah.
they have so many seeds. And so that's everywhere. And I would also say I like chamomile well enough, but that's everywhere in our garden too. I think we initially planted that in 2 spots, and now that's
Yeah.
you can find it in our walkway. It's coming up through one of the area between a brick right now. I just
Yeah.
noticed outside. So some of those that we don't have as much use for, but that still show up everywhere, I
Mm-hmm.
would say those would probably be my, if we had to say a least favorite. They're still usable. They're still
Yeah.
fine in many ways, but when they're that aggressive, I'll take a step back from them.
Yeah, that's for sure. For me this year, in a similar situation I have is I've got a little herb garden. So I've got all sorts of things, oreganos, mints, dill, chives, all sorts of things growing in there. But the one thing I did, and I knew well enough, let's just grow it make sure it's in a container like all of our mints and everything, because they'll spread around or they'll get everywhere, is lemon balm.
Uh-huh.
You get one, if you miss one seed pod or one seed stem coming off of this sort of thing, you're gonna, oh man, and it's everywhere right now. It's like you
Yeah,
said, it's growing up out of the rocks and the cracks and all over in any space. And even because I grow down an alleyway as well too, and it's up at the front of the alleyway, the herb garden. So going down the alleyway, you see it popping up all over the place. And another
it's
one
great.
that's really strangely like that, which took a few years before it actually stopped popping up all over the place after I let one go to seed one year, was tomatillos. Or I
Oh,
let a couple of them go or birds spread them around. But I had tomatillo plants growing like wild all over the place for a couple of years. It's amazing. You wouldn't necessarily think a plant like that produces a fruit is going to spread all over the place like that. I don't really know how it actually does it, but yeah.
we had in our community garden space, which I was working on earlier today. It's a pretty good area, but we had only planted some winter squash and corn. Those were our primary pieces over there last year, and some sweet potatoes. But we had 3 or 4 tomatillos pop up that we
Yeah.
definitely didn't plant. And so my guess is when
Mhm.
they clear out the whole area, they plow whatever's there. It just, you're right. It seeds everywhere. I've definitely seen that as well. But I guess in a way, it's somewhat like when I say with tomatoes, if you especially cherry tomatoes, you plant it once, you probably never have to really plant it again, because those seeds are going
Mhm.
to be everywhere.
Yep.
But I like tomatoes
Yeah,
a lot, so it's not a problem.
Yes, yes, and that's how I got us set up with one of my favorite cherry tomato varieties, and I have a certain space, and I do, I purposely leave behind the biggest, juiciest looking ones, and I let them just, ripen up and literally just fall off themselves off of the plant, and then I get them to reseed every single year, and we're like 8 years in a row now, just having them just volunteer. I don't even have to think about seeding them or planting them ahead of time, and then I get my favorite variety of tomatoes just popping
Phenomenal.
up every single year. Yeah, so they're really great. And but on the same time though, is that they fall and they drop right there in that spot, you know
Yeah, hundreds in
and
one
that's
area.
where you can look forward to them popping up the next time. I mean, tomatillos, for some reason, those seeds find themselves all over the place. And a similar relative of the tomatillo is the ground cherry, and that's the one.
Yes.
That one is the one I really would like to see that sort of thing happen. I wouldn't mind those volunteering everywhere, like the tomatillo does. But yeah, those are really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I love ground cherries.
All right. So, what along the way of your gardening experience and everything inspires you to start a YouTube channel and share all of this with everybody out there?
What's really funny about having a YouTube channel is that you have a record of everything, and then you can go back and look at your first couple
Hmm.
videos, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But well, quality changes over time, but
That's right.
but I mean, I had something I wanted to. We had something we wanted to share, and I think and I don't think I know our first video was setting up our worm bin, our vermiculture setup, like a homemade setup. And in conversation with my wife, we talked about how we're doing all of this. We're trying our best to expand, to take away the necessity to be dependent on the store for our produce. We think it's important. We think it's good for our family. We think there's a lot that we have to share. And if we can expand our audience to reach more people, to encourage more people to try this, to really teach what we're learning as we go. And I think I try to make this very clear on our channel. I've never claimed to be an expert at what we do, but I am somebody who loves to learn and who's willing to
Hmm.
share exactly what our path takes. And that was
Yeah.
it. We saw this and we said, hey, we're doing this work. We think
Hmm.
other people can take advantage of some of the same things we're taking advantage of, can learn from from our mistakes, from our ability to do the things that we do here. So why not take the opportunity and share that out with as many people as we can? And on top of that, a big part of what we try to do here is to give back to our community, our YouTube community in particular. And so that's a piece. I mean, earlier December through February, we did our 31 days of giving, where we tried to give things to people who are part of our community, to
Yeah.
give them another opportunity to move forward with whatever their gardening practice was. And so I think for me and for us as a family, it all comes full circle to being, we're sharing what we have, as a part of our journey and that learning, and then we're trying to encourage other people to do the same thing because we know how beneficial it is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And very similar for me, I started on the encouragement of others around me who saw the sort of things I was doing, because my gardening space is really kind of open to the public. I kind of have an open back space, just a back cemented patio. I do all these, small space containers, elevated raised beds. We're along an alleyway, which me and my neighbor also both kind of utilize those sides of the alleyway in order to grow things and all of that. We also, I mean, early on before I started my channel, we're growing I had a really cool pepper patch, container pepper patch up on
Mhm.
top of a carport rooftop that we have off of our space. And people just walk by and were always just kind of fascinated and asking me questions about things. And every now and then I'd get people who are like, you need to share this. You make videos or anything? I'd get questions on that. So that kind of encouraged me because I'd already been a huge fan of just gardening on YouTube and social media, and that's where I really kind of learned and got inspired to do a lot of the different things that I was doing. So it just kind of seemed to be kind of a natural thing for me to just kind of go ahead and move on into that space myself and start sharing everything. And then also similar, and I like what you said about, the idea that you're learning, you don't, it's not necessarily that, I mean, and I kind of struggle with the idea myself of saying that I'm a teacher of gardening because I think there's just so many great people out there that have so much individual knowledge on all sorts of aspects of gardening that are doing YouTube channels already and giving some really great advice, including our guest we got coming up here later, someone I've been following for many years and
Yeah,
just does
absolutely.
tons of really great videos, Gary Pilarchik and the Rusted Garden. And but I wanted to kind of give a chance to kind of show kind of the uniqueness of my garden, but in the same time, um, kind of more or less just kind of a garden experience versus a garden education. Even though we're learning things, we're teaching the things that I'm learning and all that sort of stuff as well too. But I really kind of consider it just more of kind of a garden adventure, in a way, kind of, they call it vlogs, call it a video diary or that sort of thing, because what you mentioned at the beginning is that you get to look back at all of this stuff, even if it is a little cringeworthy, some of those early videos and all of that, but
Yeah,
but
I
it's
think I love that. I love that about gardening is I'm
yeah,
not going to sit here and say this is how you have to do this
right.
thing
Hmm.
because what works for me might not work for somebody else. Plus, who am I to say this is the number one way? But for both of us, we can sit there and say I'm exposing you to a way that worked for me, or that this
Yep.
worked this way for me. Give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of just showing that experience to other people, and try to be encouraging on that sort of level. And again, showing those things that work for me and kind of relay those a little bit. And gardening is a constant learning process. You should always be trying different things. And especially if you're looking for success in some stuff and you're just not finding it, reach out, try, do different things, experiment with things. I mean, that's kind of the fun of gardening in the long run. I always say, if you're not learning, you're not gardening.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right. So, you got anything fun planned ahead for your garden or your channel or anything that you can share with everybody?
Well, we are in the season of trying to get everything out. I'll say that. I thought your opening segment was very appropriate. We've got a whole
Yeah.
bunch of stuff hardening off on our porch right now. It's been out there for about a week and a half, and so we're in that mode of I'm so busy right now kind of mode. But we're doing some experimenting around with some true potato seeds. We've had to restart a couple of times, but that's exciting. We have a bunch of vertical gardening work that we're going to be doing this year. I'm really excited for the green stalk, but also we have some homemade, we call them vertical roost out beds, but basically they're old tomato cages that are 4 foot tall, filled with hay that's now in year two. I'm excited to see what we can do with that this year. And just a ton of work coming up, a ton of content. I've actually got a video that's going to come out a little bit later today where we take a look at some of our potatoes that we overwintered in some sand in a bucket. And I don't want to spoil anything there, but sweet potato content, hashtag team potato and team sweet
Team.
potato coming up.
Yes.
But all around, it's just a busy time, and we've got a ton of great content coming up on the channel. Um, yeah, that's it. We're many and
Awesome.
varied things.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I really enjoy all of the things that you do on your channel. And for everybody who's watching, be sure to get down in the description there, follow a link, go subscribe to Paul and his channel, Guten Gardening, and see all of those fun things coming up and learn a little bit about some potatoes.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right, Paul. Again, thank you so much for joining with us here on the Let's Get Growing show. It's really awesome to have you, and it was a great gardening conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having us. Okay.
Absolutely. We'll see you again
Have a
soon.
great day. Yes.